Hello and welcome to the second part of our lesson entitled The Self in the Social World. In the first video, we've talked about the spotlight effect and the illusion of transparency, self-concept, and self-esteem. In this video, we're going to talk about perceived self-control, self-serving biases, and self-presentation. So far, we have considered what self-concept is, how it develops, and how well or poorly we know ourselves. Now, let's see why our self-concept matters by viewing the self in action. Now, the capacities or the self's capacity for action has limits noted by Roy Baumeister and his colleagues. Consider the following. People who exert self-control by forcing themselves to eat radishes rather than chocolates, or by suppressing forbidden thoughts subsequently quit faster when given unsolvable puzzles. So the second is that people who have tried to control their emotional response to an unpleasant or upsetting movie exhibit decreased physical stamina, and that people who have spent their willpower on tasks such as controlling their emotions during an upsetting film later become more aggressive and more likely to fight with their partners. So they also become less restrained in their sexual thoughts and behaviors. In one study, students who depleted their willpower by focusing their attention on a difficult task were later when asked to express a comfortable level of intimacy with their partner, more likely to make out and even remove some clothing. Effortful self-control depletes our limited willpower. Our brain's central executives consume available blood sugar when engaged in self-control. And self-control, therefore, operates similar to muscular strength, concluded by Baumeister and Julia Exline. Both are weaker after exertion, replenished with rest, and strengthened by exercise. Although the self's energy can be temporarily depleted, our self-concept do influence our behaviors. Given challenging tasks, people who imagine themselves as hardworking and successful tend to outperform those who imagine themselves as failure. Envision your positive possibilities and you become more likely to plan and enact a successful strategy. Now, one of the things that we have to talk about when we look into self-control is self-efficacy. Now, self-efficacy is designed as a sense or as the sense that one is competent and effective. This should be distinguished from self-esteem, which is one's sense of self-worth. A bombardier might feel high self-efficacy and low self-esteem. In everyday life, self-efficacy leads us to set challenging goals and to persist. More than 100 studies show that self-efficacy predicts workers' productivity. For example, when problems arise, a strong sense of self-efficacy leads workers to stay calm and seek solutions rather than ruminate on their inadequacies. Competence plus persistence equals accomplishment, if you think about it. And with accomplishment, self-confidence grow. So self-efficacy, like self-esteem, grow with hard-won achievements. Even the subtle manipulations of self-efficacy can affect our behavior. Becca Levy in 1996 discovered this when she subliminally exposed 90 older adults to words that evoked or primed either a negative or a positive stereotype about aging. Some subjects viewed 0 or 0.006 seconds presentations of negative words such as decline, forget, senile, or of positive words such as sage, wise, and learned. At the conscious level, the participants perceived only a flash of light. Yet being given positive words led to heightened memory self-efficacy. This is our confidence in one's memory and better memory performances. Viewing the negative words had the opposite effect. We can observe a similar phenomenon outside the laboratory. Older adults in China where positive images of aging prevails and memory self-efficacy may be greater, seem to suffer less memory decline than is commonly observed in Western countries. If you believe you can do something, will that belief necessarily make a difference? Well, that depends on a second factor. Do you have control over your outcomes? You may, for example, feel like an effective driver. This means that you have high self-efficacy, yet feel endangered by drunken drivers. You have low control. You may feel like a competent student or worker, but fearing discrimination based on your age, gender, or appearance, you may think your prospect of success are dim. Many people confuse self-efficacy with self-esteem. If you believe you can do something, that is self-efficacy. If you like yourself overall, that is self-esteem. When you were a child, your parents may have encouraged you by saying things like you're special. This is intended to build self-esteem, or instead of I know you can do it. So, which is intended to build self-efficacy. One study showed that self-efficacy feedback, you tried really hard, or I saw how much effort you put in your work, led to better performance than self-esteem feedback, like you're really smart. Now, children told they were smart were afraid to try again. Maybe they wouldn't look so smart the next time. Those praised for working hard, however, knew they could exert more effort again. This is from the research by Mueller and Dweck, which was the foundation for Dweck's ideas of the growth mindset. If you want to encourage someone, focus on their self-efficacy and not their self-esteem. The message here is clear. As what I have mentioned earlier, given challenging tasks, people who imagine themselves as hardworking and successful tend to outperform those who imagine themselves as failure. Now, what do you think about your own life? Are you more often in charge of your destiny, or are you a victim of circumstance? Now, Rutter called this dimension locus of control. With Fairs, he developed 29 paired statements to measure a person's locus of control. Imagine taking this test. Which statements do you more strongly agree? Do you agree that in the long run, people get the respect they deserve in the world? Do you agree that what happens to me is or what happens to you is your own doing? Or do you agree that the average person can have an influence in government decision? Or do you agree more to what is clustered under letter B? Things like, unfortunately, people's worth passes unrecognized no matter how hard they try. And that sometimes you feel that you don't have enough control over the direction of your life that your life is taking, or this world is run by the few people in power and there is not much that the little guy can do about it. Now, if your answers to these questions were mostly A, or do you agree more, if your tendency is to agree more with statements under letter A, you probably believe you control your own destiny. This means that you have an internal locus of control. If your answers were mostly B, you probably feel chance or outside forces determine your fate, which means that you might have an external locus of control. Now, locus of control is the extent to which people perceive outcomes as intentionally or internally controllable by their own efforts, or as externally controlled by chance or outside forces. Those who see themselves as internally controlled are more likely to do well in school, successfully stop smoking, wear seatbelt, deal with marital problems directly, earn a substantial income, and delay instant gratification to achieve long-term goals. How much control we feel is actually related to how we explain setbacks. Perhaps you have known students who view themselves as victims, who blame poor grades on bad internet connection, things that are beyond their control, such as feelings of stupidity or their poor teachers, text or tests, or probably their horoscope, or if they are INTF or INTJ, or things like that, things that are outside their control. If such students are coached to adapt to a more hopeful attitude, to believe that effort, good study habits, and self-discipline can make a difference, their academic performance tend to go up. In general, students who feel in control, who, for example, agree that I am good at resisting temptation, get better grades, enjoy better relationships, and exhibit better mental health. They are also less likely to cheat. Students who were told that free will is an illusion, that what happens to them is outside their control, picked at answers and paid themselves more money for mediocre work. Some people, however, have taken this idea a little too far. The popular book The Secret, for example, claims that thinking about positive thoughts causes positive things to happen to you. Like the only reason any person does not have any money is because they are blocking money from coming into them with their thoughts. So let's not help those poor people in Afghanistan or in Zimbabwe or in Ethiopia, because all they need to do is to think happy thoughts, and the Taliban will be gone, and that they will be lifted out of poverty, and that world peace will return. And if you are sick, your thoughts just aren't positive enough, despite the thousands of cancer patients who desperately want to get well. Obviously, there are limits to the power of positive thinking. Being optimistic and feeling in control can reap great benefits. But poverty and sickness can happen to anyone, even those who think positively and always have happy thoughts in their heads. Now, the benefits of feelings of control also appear in animal research. Dog confined in a cage and taught that they cannot escape shocks will learn a sense of helplessness. Later, these dogs cower passively in other situations when they could escape punishment. Dogs that learn personal control by successfully escaping their first shocks adapt easily to new situations. Now, researcher and father of positive psychology Martin Seligman noted similarities to this learned helplessness in human situation. Seligman defined learned helplessness as the sense of hopelessness and resignation learned when a human or animal perceives no control over their repeated bad events. Depressed or oppressed people, for example, become passive because they believe their efforts have no effect. Helpless dogs and depressed people both suffer paralysis of the will, passively resigning to their fate, even motionless apathy. The process of learned helplessness goes as follows. When animals or people experience uncontrollable bad events like this, they may learn to feel helpless and be resigned because they perceive that they have no control over these uncontrollable bad events. Now, on the other hand, self-determination is each person's ability to make choices and exert control over their own lives. Self-determination allows people to feel that they have control over their choices and lives. People who perceive themselves as having free choice experience greater satisfaction with their lives, and countries where people experience more freedom have more satisfied citizens. Studies confirm that systems of government or managing people that promote personal control will indeed promote health and happiness. Here are some additional examples. Prisoner given some control over their environments by being able to move chairs, control TV sets, and operate the lights, experience less stress, exhibit fewer health problems, and commit less vandalism. Workers given leeway in carrying out tasks and making decisions experience improved morale. So do telecommuting workers who have more flexibility in balancing their work and personal life. Institutionalized residents or allowed choice in matters such as what to eat for breakfast, when to go to a movie, whether to sleep late or get up early, may live longer and certainly are happier. Homeless shelters, which housed residents who perceived little choice in when to eat and sleep and little control over their privacy, are more likely to have a passive, helpless attitude regarding finding housing and work. In all countries studied, people who perceive themselves as having free choice experience greater satisfaction with their lives, and countries where people experience more freedom have more satisfied citizens. And this is why self-determination is actually a serious matter. So at this point, I want you to think about 3 reasons why other people are poor. Also, while you are out it, why don't you also think about reasons why other people are outside even when ECQ or GCQ in whichever level is being implemented still go out? And also, since you're already in a contemplation mode, I also want you to think about the reasons why you need to go out even when you are quarantined. So, in thinking why some people are poor or why some people go out despite being quarantined, I want you to consider these reasons in terms of self-serving biases. Self-serving bias is the tendency to perceive oneself favorably. Most of us actually have a good reputation of ourselves. And I want you to think about how do you measure to the rest of the world. Now, if everyone formed a queue according to, let's say, how talented, attractive, or moral they were, where would you stand? Are you good enough to get into heaven? Now, most of us, as I have mentioned earlier, have a good reputation with ourselves. In studies of self-esteem, even low-scoring people respond in the mid-range of possible scores. This means that a low self-esteem person responds on statements such as "I have good ideas" with qualifying adjectives such as "somewhat" or "sometimes." In a study of self-esteem across 53 nations, the average self-esteem score was above the midpoint in every single country. On one of social psychology's most provocative yet firmly established conclusion concerns the potency of self-serving biases or self-serving bias, and this is actually the focus of this part of the lesson. So, people tend to attribute their success to their ability and effort, but they tend to attribute failure to external factors such as bad luck or the problem's inherent impossibility. That's actually the main reason why basketball teams in the Philippines don't lose fairly. Most people would attribute their loss to cheating referees or conspiracy between the referee and other teams. Now, self-serving attribution is our tendency to attribute positive outcomes to oneself and negative outcomes to other factors. This is because we may fall prey to the fundamental attribution error, or the tendency for people to underemphasize situational explanations for an individual's observed behavior while overemphasizing dispositional and personality-based explanations for their behavior. So, the next time that you think about why other people are poor or why other people don't follow quarantine rules, remember that we tend to misattribute behaviors to dispositions like matigas ang ulo or tamad or sadyang masama ang ugali, even when there are situations, external circumstances, which can explain behaviors like systemic corruption uh, not enough resources or not enough access to resources that are important in order for people to stay at home. So, we are even biased against seeing our own biases. People claim they avoid self-serving bias themselves, but readily acknowledge that other people commit this bias. Bias blind spot is our tendency to see oneself as less biased than other people or to be able to identify more cognitive biases in others than in oneself. Moreover, another interesting cognitive bias is what we call as the illusory superiority or better than average effect, which is a cognitive bias wherein a person overestimates their own qualities and abilities in relation to the same qualities and abilities of other people. Now, the better than average effect or illusory superiority means that most people believe they are better than the average. But the normal distribution, because of the normal distribution, it's impossible for everyone to be better than the average because most people, according to the normal distribution theory, stays within or around the perimeters of the average. Now, the better than average effect is observed because average is often considered or construed as below median ability. Young married Canadians, for example, usually believe they took more responsibility for such actions as cleaning the house and caring for the children than their spouse credited them for. Researchers have wondered, do people really believe they're above average self-estimates? Is their self-serving bias partly a function of how the questions are phrased? When Eleanor Williams and Thomas Gilovich in 2008 had people bet real money when estimating their relative performance on tests, they found that yes, people truly believe their self-enhancing self-assessments. Now, remember when people said that COVID will die a natural death? Or when the president assured us that things will be back to normal by December 2020? And actually, we're just 3 months before December 2021. Now, these things are evidences of what is called optimism bias, or the cognitive bias that causes someone to believe that they themselves are less likely to experience a negative event. Now, the optimism bias doesn't mean that we have an overly sunny outlook of our own lives. It can also lead to poor decision making, which can sometimes have disastrous results. People might skip their yearly physical or not wear face mask even when it's required, not add money to their emergency fund, or fail to put sunscreen because they mistakenly believe that bad things won't happen to them. This is also the main reason why a lot of people don't wear their seatbelts, because they think that they are better drivers than other people. Now, Tali Sharrow, the author of The Optimism Bias, a tour on of the irrationally positive brain, explained that if we expect good things to happen, we are more likely to be happy. This optimism can act as a self-fulfilling prophecy. Optimism also motivates us to pursue our goal. After all, if we did not believe that we could achieve success, why would we even bother trying? Optimism optimists rather are also more likely to take measures to protect their health, such as exercising, taking vitamins, and following a nutritious diet. Researchers have suggest various causes that lead to the optimism bias, including cognitive and motivational factors. When we are evaluating our risks, we compare our own situation to that of other people, but we are also egocentric. We focus on ourselves instead of realistically looking at how we compare to others. But we are also highly motivated to be so optimistic. By believing that we are unlikely to fail and more likely to succeed, we have a better self-esteem, lower self-stress, or lower stress levels, and better overall well-being. So the another thing that we need to do to look at are false consensus effect and false uniqueness effect. Remember when people say that kahit sinong lalaki naman pag nakakita ng babaeng maiksi ang damit ay hindi makakatiis? This is called false consensus effect, or the tendency to overestimate the commonalities of one's opinion and one's undesirable or unsuccessful behavior. No, not everyone or not every male who see a female wearing skimpy clothes are unable to control their urges. You need to realize that we as human beings and not animals can control our urges, and that you're just trying to justify yourself by saying this kind of things. So, false consensus effect and false uniqueness effect happens because we are egocentric. We think other people share our opinion, and at the same time, we like to believe that we are unique too. So, the question is, why do we have so many biases? That's because of a number of reasons. First, they allow us to savor the good things that happen to us. Okay, seeing ourselves in a sunny filter tend to make us feel good about the things that are happening in our lives. Second, they help us explain away feelings of defeat and keep us sane. Imagine if 100% of the time you are flooded with ideas or memories that you have been defeated or that you have failed. Would you still have the same sanity level as you have right now? And that they have the effect of causing us to blame others or feel cheated out of something we deserve. So these are the things why we have so many biases. They keep you sane, they keep you happy, they keep you feeling motivated, and they even make you look at your life more positively. So far, we have seen that the self is at the center of our social world, that self-esteem and self-efficacy pay some dividends, and that self-serving bias influence self-evaluation. Perhaps you have wondered, are self-enhancing expressions always sincere? Do people have the same feelings privately as they express publicly? Or are they just putting on a positive face even when living with self-doubt? Now, self-presentation refers to how people attempt to present themselves to control or shape how other people, called their audiences, view them. So, the first thing that we have to look at when we talk about self-presentation is self-handicapping, or one way that we present ourselves is through handicapping ourselves. Sometimes, people sabotage their chances for success by creating impediments that make success less likely. Far from being deliberately self-destructive, such behaviors typically have a self-protective aim. Saying things like, hindi ako nag-review, or kahapon ko lang sinimulan, or partida, wala pang tulog yan, or minsan, may corny joke ako. Self-handicapping is protecting one's self-image with behaviors that create a handy excuse for later failure. For example, when your joke is really corny, and you don't expect anyone to, or anyone did, and that nobody laughed at your joke, you might even say, Or you might justify the corniness of your joke by saying, di ba sabi ko, corny yung joke ko kanina pa? So, why would people handicap themselves with self-defeating behaviors, you might ask? Recall that we eagerly protect our self-image by attributing failures to external factors. Can you see why? Fearing failure, people might handicap themselves by partying half the night before a job interview or playing video games instead of studying before big exams. When self-image is tied up with performance, it can be more self-deflating to try hard and fail than to procrastinate and have a really good ready excuse. If we fail while handicapped in some way, we can cling to a sense of competence. If we succeed under such conditions, it can only boost our self-image. Handicaps protect both self-esteem and public image by allowing us to attribute failures to something temporary or external. Saying things like, I was feeling sick, or I was out too late the night before, rather than to lack of talent or ability. So, Stephen Berglas and Edward Jones in 1978 confirmed this analysis of self-handicapping. One experiment was announced as concerning drugs and intellectual performances. Imagine yourself in the position of their Duke University participants. You guess answers to some difficult aptitude questions and then are told yours was one of the best scores seen to date. Feeling incredibly lucky, you are then offered a choice between two drugs before answering more of these items. One drug will aid intellectual performance and the other will inhibit it. Which drug do you want? Now, interestingly, most students wanted the drug that supposedly disrupt their thinking, thus providing a handy excuse for anticipated poorer performance. Researchers have documented other ways people self-handicap. Fearing failure, people will, number one, reduce their preparation for important individual athletic events, and that they might give their opponents an advantage. Fearing failure, people will perform poorly at the beginning of the task in order to not create unreachable expectations. People will also not try as hard as they could during a tough ego-involving tasks. Self-serving bias, false modesty, and self-handicapping reveal the depth of our concern for self-image. To varying degrees, we are continually managing the impressions we create. Whether we wish to impress, intimidate, or seem helpless, we are social animals playing to an audience. Impression management is a process in which people attempt to influence the perception of other people about a person, including themselves, objects, or event. We want to present a desired image both to an external audience, that is other people, and to our internal audience, that is ourselves. So, we might post on Facebook things like feeling cute, might delete later, in order to protect ourselves from the shame when other people don't like or don't react to our pictures. It might even we're actually trying to send a message to other people that I just posted this because I felt cute and that I'm not asking for your approval, even when we are actually waiting for other people to like our pictures. Now, social networking sites such as Facebook, Instagram, and even TikTok provide a new and sometimes intense venue for self-presentation. They are, say, communication professor Joseph Walter, like impression management on steroids. Users make careful decisions about which pictures, activities, and interests to highlight in their profile. Some even think about how their friends will affect the impressions they make on others. So much so that celebrities and other high-profile persons have social media managers to manage, to to manage their profile, to create an image that is likable to their audience. Uh, uh, I don't know, one study found that those with more attractive friends were perceived as more attractive themselves. Given the concern with status and attractiveness on social networking sites, it's not surprising that people high in narcissistic traits thrive on Facebook, tallying up more friends and choosing more attractive pictures of themselves. We make sure not to brag too much and risk the disapproval of other people. So in order to do this, we try to, as much as possible, humble brag or manage the impression that we are not bragging that much, but just a little bit. We might, for example, avoid posting pictures on our timeline and instead opt to upload it as stories. Given that example too, this is actually one of the reasons why a lot of people also opt to uploading stories instead of posts, because they can actually monitor how much people are viewing their stories. And they cannot do this to their post because the posts, or rather Facebook posts, only show how much person reacted or liked your picture. So there are people who opt to upload their images to their stories instead. So the last thing that we have to talk about in this lesson is self-monitoring. So for some people, conscious self-presentation is a way of life. They continually monitor their own behavior and note how other people react and adjust their social performances to gain desired effects. This is not only done by politicians or celebrities. A lot of people on Facebook, on other social media, do this by posting something, and when other people react negatively, they would react by either deleting this post or by editing this post so that it could come out as something more positive, something more likable. Now, those who score high on a scale of self-monitoring tendencies, who, for example, agree that I tend to be what people expect me to be, act like social chameleons. They adjust their behaviors. Their behavioral response to external situations. Having attuned their behaviors to the situation, they're more likely to espouse attitudes they don't really hold. Being conscious of others, they are less likely to act on their own attitudes. As Mark Leary in 2004 found, the self they know often differs from the self they show on Facebook. As social chameleons, those who score high in self-monitoring are also less committed to their relationships and are more likely to be dissatisfied in their marriages. Those who score low in self-monitoring care less about what other people think. They are more internally guided and thus more likely to talk and act as they feel and believe. For example, if asked to list their thoughts about gay couples, they simply express what they think regardless of the attitudes of their anticipated audience. As you might imagine, someone who is extremely low in self-monitoring could come across as an insensitive boor, whereas extremely high self-monitoring individuals could result in dishonest behavior worthy of a con artist. Most of us fall somewhere between those extremes, presenting ourselves in a way that create a desired impressions in a delicate balancing act. People want to be seen as able, but also as modest and honest. In most social situations, modesty creates a good impression, unsolicited boasting a bad one. Hence the false modesty phenomenon. We often display lower self-esteem than we privately feel, but we have But when we have obviously done extremely well, the insincerity of a disclaimer, I did well, but it's no big deal, may be evident. To make, to make good impressions, to appear modest yet competent requires social skills. And this ends our lesson on the self in the social world. Thank you for watching, and my name is Dex Kamitan.